Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Rishabha Uvacha.
Rishabha Uvacha.
Nayam Deha Deha Bhajam Nirloke.
Nayam Deha Bhajam Nirloke.
Kastan Kaman Arhate Vidbhujam Ye.
Kastan Kaman Arhate Vidbhujam Ye.
Tapo Divyam Prutakayena Sattvam.
Tapo Divyam Putrakayena Sattvam.
Yad Yasmad Brahma Saukyam Tvanantam.
Yasmad Brahma Saukyam Tvanantam.
Nayam Deho Bhaja Nayam Deho Deha Bhajam Nirloke.
Nayam Deho Deha Bhajam Nirloke.
Kastan Kaman Arhate Vidbhujam Ye.
Kastan Kaman Arhate Vidbhujam
Tapo
Ye.
Divyam Putrakayena Sattvam.
Tapo Divyam Putrakayena Sattvam.
Yad Yasmad Brahma Saukyam Tvanantam.
Yasmad Brahma Saukyam Tvanantam.
Lord Rishabdev told his sons, my dear boys, of all the living entities who have accepted material bodies, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for dogs and hogs that eat stool. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activities, one's heart is purified, and when one attains this position, he attains eternal, blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, Lord Rishabdev tells his sons about the importance of human life. The word deha bhak refers to anyone who accepts a material body, but the living entity who is awarded this human form must act differently from animals. Animals, like dogs and hogs, enjoy sense gratification by eating stool. After undergoing severe hardships all day, human beings are trying to enjoy themselves at night by eating, drinking, having sex, and sleeping. At the same time, they have to properly defend themselves. However, this is not human civilization. Human life means voluntarily practicing suffering for the advancement of spiritual life. There is, of course, suffering in the lives of animals and plants, which are suffering due to their past misdeeds. However, human beings should voluntarily accept suffering in the form of austerities and penances in order to attain the divine life. After attaining the divine life, one can enjoy happiness eternally. After all, every living entity is trying to enjoy happiness, but as long as one is encaged in the material body, he has to suffer different kinds of misery. A higher sense is present in human form. We should act according to superior advice in order to attain eternal happiness and go back to Godhead. Paragraph. It is significant in this verse that the government and the natural guardians, the Father, should educate subordinates and raise them to Krishna consciousness, devoid of Krishna consciousness. Every living being suffers in this cycle of birth and death perpetually. To relieve them from this bondage and enable them to become blissful and happy, bhakti yoga should be taught. A foolish civilization neglects to teach people how to rise to the platform of bhakti yoga. Without Krishna consciousness, a person knows no better than a hog or dog. The instructions of Rishabdev are very essential at the present moment. People are being educated and trained to work very hard for sense gratification, and there's no sublime aim in life. A man travels to earn his livelihood, leaving home early in the morning, catching a local train, India, and being packed in a compartment. He has to stand for an hour or two in order to reach his place of business. Then again, he takes a bus to get to the office. At the office, he works hard from 9 to 5. Then he takes 2 or 3 hours to return home. After eating, he has sex and goes to sleep. For this hardship, his only happiness is a little sex. Yan maitunadi grihamedi sukham chum. Lord Rishabdev clearly states that human life is not meant for this kind of existence, which is enjoyed even by hogs and dogs. Indeed, dogs and hogs do not have to work so hard for sex. A human being should try to live in a different way and should not try to imitate dogs and hogs. The alternative is mentioned. Human life is meant for tapasya, austerity and penance. By tapasya, one can get out of the material clutches. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, devotional service, his happiness is guaranteed eternally. By taking to bhakti yoga, devotional service, one's existence is purified. The living entity is seeking happiness life after life, but he can make a solution to all his problems simply by practicing bhakti yoga. Then he immediately becomes eligible to return home back to Godhead, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4:9. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tattvataha yakva deham punarjanma naitimam eti sorjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. I picked this verse because one of my daily habits as I listen to recordings of Prabhupada's lectures from way back when. And there are two places that I've noticed that he spoke maybe 30 times, different classes. These first two verses of Canto 5, Chapter 5, Bishop Dave's teaching to his sons. And again, and making similar points again and again and again and again. So it kind of went in. And the fact that Prabhupada was emphasizing the message of these two verses. Another place that he spoke many, many times again and again is the first verse of chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita. So the context is Rishabdev, a little bit about him. He's an incarnation of the personality of Godhead. He's in the Vishnu Tattva category. Not just a jiva that's empowered, he's in the Vishnu Tattva category, supreme person appearing. And he ruled very the details of his ruling is not presented, but Prabhupada would speak about his being an ideal king. And in the course of his being a king, he made arrangements that he would have a successor king. He had 100 sons, chief of which, the eldest of whom was Bharat. And so he's preparing his sons to take over the kingdom, specifically in future verses. He's going to instruct them, follow Bharat, because he is eminently qualified and passing on he's passing the kingdom on to his sons. These are his parting instructions after all the training that they have received from him in the course of their life. He's giving essential messages. Now, these are highly qualified verses that we know from what happened to Bharat later. He wasn't just a king, just a righteous king. He was a very highly spiritually advanced person. But how did that happen? From the instructions? Does anyone become advanced from instructions and instructions that are taken? So he's repeating, and there's no harm in repeating, fundamental instructions. That's the context. And then the teaching is both the minus and the plus, the do's and the do nots. What relationship between the Puranas and the Shrutis, or the Smritis and the Shrutis. Smritis explain and give examples of how to live your life according to what the Shrutis teach. The Shrutis teach about the absolute truth, and the Puranas teach how you do it. Give you an explanation of practical application. So the teaching is singularly to dedicate oneself to the absolute truth in pursuing knowledge of the absolute truth. Now, different people have different ideas of what the absolute truth is. And so it's important to have teachings that make what that absolute truth is very clear. So he's a person, but he's a person who lived by the codes of the Vedas, and the codes of the Vedas they never encourage indulgence in sense gratification. So the do not is don't live like animals. So specifically, the dog and the stool eater, dog and the hog. Their business, in language that Prabhupada use repeatedly, is sense gratification. There's an urge, and so you follow the urge. If you're hungry, you find something to eat, and if you're lusty, you find an object to fulfill your lust. And sleeping, any place, anywhere, etc. So, ending animal propensities, there's an urge, and you just follow the urge. Now, extracting from the Puranas, particularly extracting from Srimad Bhagavatam, our acharyas have taken, of course, commentary, but they've also written their own books, as Rupa Goswami did. Vacho Vegam, Manasakota Vegam. The pushings are not to be, don't live like an animal. Same message. Because the animals, if they have an urge, and so they fulfill that urge. But don't follow the urge. Don't be controlled by or dictated by an urge, this one, that one, or a combination. But then what's the alternative? So that's the do not part. And then there's the do. The do not is don't live like an animal. And his example is besides chasing after sense gratification, the working hard. And why? What is the necessity? If you, the teaching is, if you don't have a higher purpose to fulfill, then you apply yourself very diligently to get the lower purpose. The lower purpose is sense gratification, and to fulfill sense gratification, you work very hard. And what the sense gratification, he is outlining, one model of sense gratification. Rising very early, commuting to get to the place of work, and it sounds like the Indian people living where simple living, high thinking was the way of life, and somehow by modernization and degradation of Kali Yuga, industrialization, instead of farms, it's became factories. And people working, Sudra capacity people working in factories with the laborers overseen by the mercantile people, the business people, to work in their factory. And by working in a factory, they get some livelihood, and from that livelihood, they live their life. And that's it. Working hard for what? The modest forms of sense gratification, not very delightful, modest forms of sense gratification. So life isn't, he's instructing his sons. The model that Prabhupada is painting certainly was a different model than what existed during Rishabhadev's time, but the principle is the same principle. Working hard for sense gratification. That's valued in society. Someone that's not hardworking, they're lazy, or lazy bum, or give different ways of describing the person, good for nothing. Because why? They don't work hard. And if you work hard, then you're a good person, because you've understood how to get ahead, and all those euphemisms. His instruction is to his sons, which in the Bhagavatam becomes his instructions for us. And the second half is the alternative. So if you don't work hard for sense gratification, then become lazy. That's not the indication. Work hard or very enthusiastic to achieve spiritual purpose. And that working hard to achieve a spiritual purpose is tapo divyam. So a little bit on this topic. Again, having heard Prabhupada speak on it several dozen times. So tapa means, or the implication of tapa is you accept some inconvenience, or it may not be to your liking, but you accept it because it's the purpose is the divyam, or the divine, divyam, or transcendental. The purpose behind so let's say it's cold weather. So materialists that are what Rishabhdev is advising against, don't be the materialist, be a spiritualist. So the materialist will also have something warm in it when it's really cold, or a fan, or something that when it gets really hot. And they'll say, make adjustments, and find that making adjustments and having the facilities for making adjustments, that's life, that's happiness. Adjusting the unwanted circumstances, not thinking beyond, why these circumstances? Why? Why must, as Sanatana Goswami indicated, why do I have to undergo the threefold miseries of material existence? Why? Is there an option? What about not? And is that an option? Why do I have to undergo miseries? I don't want them. They're unwanted. Why? So that's a good question. And the alternative is also a good question. What to do to get free from the miseries? Because you know the why, you can find your way out of the miseries. So the why has to do with using the language we were just from the second canto Bhagavatam, misguided civilization that has the misguided aim or objective of life. So if the objective of life is satisfy the senses, work hard to satisfy the senses. And that's life. And that's happiness. That's the aim of life. The happiness of sense gratification. Well, it's not real what the happiness is, but who's happy with sense gratification, but people just accept it because that's the option. There's only one thing on the menu. Work hard for sense gratification. Then you can pick varieties of work hard for sense gratification because that's what's on the menu. Work hard for sense gratification. The devotees work very hard. That's not a problem. It's who could work with the intensity that Srila Prabhupada worked. Read a little or hear from those who had his association. And he was an intense person, but in terms of his activity level, he wasn't advocating laziness. But what was the purpose of that activity? Whatever level of activity, what did we do? It is the purposefulness of, or the absence of this transcendental purpose. So therefore, tapo divyam, putraka. Putraka means, he's speaking putraka. Putra means sons, and ka means the diminutive, my young sons. Putraka. Tapo divyam, that's what one should do. A guardian, a parent, in this case, he's the head of state, he's the emperor, or a friend, or all these persons that have some capacity of influence over others and an opportunity to train others. He's done it from their childhood, but he's just reiterating it because he's about to depart for the forest after turning the kingdom over to his eldest son. It's preparing, continued or final exclamation point in preparing his sons for the journey of life. Tapo divyam putra kayena shudyat. So the divyam purpose, the divine or transcendental purpose, has the effect of shudyam, bringing purification. So what's that purification? It's pretty simple. There's things that are unwanted, subtle things unwanted within. The purification is to free oneself from those subtle unwanted things. Anartha vritti, in the language of Rupa Goswami, or abhadras within, unwanted, inauspicious things within. That's the language of the Bhagavatam. So purification, shuddhyat, purification of consciousness, so that one isn't drawn away by disturbing desires that one finds attractive, but you follow those, they look like attractive, and you end up disturbed. Because that isn't what real happiness is. We want real happiness. The options are quite plain. The material and the spiritual. So back to the spiritual. Tapo divyam putraka yena Sattvam Shudyat Yasmat Brahma Sokyam Tvanantam. Brahma Sokyam means spiritual happiness. Brahma Sokyam. That's the outcome. You relieve yourself of the distractions, the root causes of the distractions, the contaminations, subtle contaminations within before you even do stuff. Just a subtle contamination of wanting to be the enjoyer of stuff. And you take away those contaminations and you have Brahmasokyam, spiritual happiness. It's already there but covered. And then you live your life accordingly and you'll experience A and B, freedom from the unwanted and awakening of the wanted. Quite simple. Principle, quite simple. And having someone who can teach it, as Rishabh Dev is doing with his sons, or a teacher or guru or something, because ideal father is functioning in that way to his dependents. And the dependents ideally are hearing from their guide, their father, their well-wisher, dear friend that's spiritually qualified, a spiritual master, a teacher, and so forth. From those positions, one can receive. And once one has received, then those two things, cleansing and awakening. Cleansing of the unwanted, awakening of the wanted. So the human life, especially, is for that purpose. Purification of existence. And don't continue, back to the first half of the verse, don't continue living like an animal where there isn't any regulation, there isn't any higher purpose or higher principle that you're living for. It's just gratify the senses and move on to the next sense urge and then do that and the next one. Or combination. And that's material life. So don't live life like that. He's going to go on, and in a few more verses, he'll start extolling the virtue of Bharata. But Bharata is not like that. He's your elder brother, and he's a virtuous person. He's eminently qualified. And because he's eminently qualified, it's proper for you to follow him. Do as he says, assist him in the activities that he's going to be taking up as the incumbent king. As you've done with me, see him like you see me. Treat him like your father and be respectful and recognize that he has wisdom. So you're in safe position. He'll guide you properly. You follow properly. And you and all the citizens in the entire kingdom will become peaceful and prosperous. Now, that's a nice teaching. Then just one more point. Who's living their life that way? Very, very slim percentage of people. But that's okay. I mean, people are making choices, and if they choose to live like a hog or a dog, as the verse is indicating, that's a choice that they may make. And then they bear the consequences of suffering and bringing suffering to others by their living their life that way. And then it becomes the chaotic place because there are lots of people doing that same business. So it's not easy being in the very small, thin percentage of persons that, according to Bhagavad Gita, very rare. According to our practical experience, also very rare. But that small slice of elevated persons have the possibility, have the potential of giving proper guidance to others in society by their words and by their actions. That's very nice. If it's taken up. So we're small in numbers. That's okay. If the numbers grow, that's more than okay. But as I was just discussing this with another Prabhupada disciple yesterday. The one moon out of so many stars. So Manushanam Sahasrinshu Kaschidhyatati Siddhaye, you all know the verse. How many thousands of persons, millions of persons, one may be interested in happiness of Brahman, spiritual happiness. Very rare, but they exist. And those that have attained, like they just have some interest, they've attained spiritual happiness, hardly one knows me. So the association of devotee, we have all had to some degree, more greater, lesser, some association with a pure devotee, particularly our founder Acharya and others who are representing our founder Acharya. And it's a very special gift. And those who have cherished and lived by that very special gift, they're special people in the world. And encouraging others to take that same message. I mean, there's lots of people that aren't interested. Lots of people living their life like hogs and dogs, back to the verse again. But of those that are interested, there's lots of different ideas. There's just, the person I was having this conversation with yesterday was Brahmatirtha. Brahmatirtha Prabhu is a wonderful devotee, Prabhupada disciple. There's many nice things to say about him. But in part of our conversation yesterday, he has, he lives in Gainesville, Florida. He's responsible for the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies. It's a branch of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which Prabhupada established and gave a mandate for what the Bhaktivedanta Institute he wanted it to do. So they're just doing this higher studies part. The main, anyway, without all the, it's a nice group of devotees working in conjunction. Maybe a month ago I was visited him. So he had a luncheon. And sitting at the table was two astrophysicists, PhD scholars in astrophysics. Imagine going to college and getting a degree in astrophysics. And they and others are have accepted the responsibility of making the model for the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. So that's like the centerpiece of what they do, and they do so many other things. So one of the persons is going to visit him this coming week is the immigration attorney that lives in New York City area. Immigration attorney that lives in New York City area. I know from way back when he was still going to college, when he and Harikesh were going to college. They went to college together. His name was Jan Potemkin. And Harikesh did what Harikesh did, became a devotee and so forth. And Jan became a Buddhist. For 30 years, he was living as a Buddhist. And then something happened, and he decided to leave Buddhism. He met Kadamba Kanana Swami, and that helped him decide to become a devotee. and now he's initiated devotee. So he made a drastic turn. First of all, having interest in negation of cessation of material existence, but then to take up spiritual existence. He did the first half of this verse, but to the second half. Tapotivyam putra kayena sattvam shudyat brahmasokyam tvanantam. So he's now initiated. And I haven't seen him in 30 years. But I knew him from, when he was much younger. He knew me when I was much younger. But a very nice person. So one can become purified. The point is, one can become purified by proper guidance. And if without proper guidance, you can try your best to live a life that's not like hogs and dogs. You can try your best to not live a life like hogs and dogs. But to go to that's the negation part, then the positive. Live your life with devotional service. And that's certainly going to come in the upcoming verses, but establishing a foundational do and do not set of explanations, which Puranas, Itihasas and Puranas both do. So let's see if there's some discussion. There's a nice group of people here. We've all been practicing Krishna consciousness for some number of years, many of you. Thanks. Any discussion? Rishabh Dev, yes.
I was questioning this, Maharaj, how the cessation of, or how the austerities and penances actually bring to the person to the spiritual life. How that actually happens?
Well, there's twofold at least. One is dialing down material. That's the austerity. But persons who aren't spiritual, they also undergo austerities, which is kind of indicating what you're saying. If you just undergo austerities, it doesn't create spiritual. Here's a little Prabhupada story. Prabhupada was describing a Christian went to a place in England where they're well known for being coal miners. You've heard the story. So he was saying, you better take shelter of Christ or you go to hell. So they wanted to know, what's hell like? So when the Christian preacher gave a description of hell, they said, well, that sounds like a workplace. It was dark and dank and, uncomfortable. Sometimes it gets really hot. That's our workplace. Then the thoughtful preacher said, there's no newspapers. Oh, I don't want to go to hell. So the description of austerities without a transcendental purpose doesn't bring spiritual happiness. Because everyone's undergoing austerities of one kind or another. Too hot, too cold, something. There's some disturbance. So your question is, how does penance and austerity bring about spiritual happiness? That's your question. What's the magic?
There is, and you also were explaining that when the person is less trying less to satisfy their material desires, they actually more available to to this like
the possibility is opened up.
Like they can restart, like
Yes.
or
So let's just back to your question. Every living entity, you were there yesterday evening. Some of you weren't there. There was this young lady at 26 Second Avenue. There was asking. She was her first visit to a Hare Krishna gathering, but she had some already existing experience or teachings that led her to believe that we are God. She didn't say that specifically, but that's what she was saying. So below, but underneath the coverings, there's who we really are. And who we really are is part and parcel of Krishna. So we're in full agreement with that. She was also in full agreement with we're part and parcel of Krishna. But part and parcel of Krishna to her means Krishna. So if you remove the covering, purposeful austerities are to remove the covering. And when you remove the covering, the potential is there to experience who we really are, or the happiness of who we really are, as opposed to the covered state of ignorance of who we aren't. So austerities and penance, not just for their own sake, but with under proper direction, with the right purpose, etc., that it has the potential, the potency to awaken who we really are, which is happy beings. So Brahma Sokyam means the happiness of spirit. So who we really are as spirit can be accessed if we remove the covering. But then the removing of the covering just can be negation of the covering without really knowing who we really are, or really knowing who we're meant to be serving instead of serving our senses or our ignorance, our ignorant desires. Therefore, really, tapo divyam, it's exactly what we were discussing in Bhagavad Gita yesterday, but really living a life of tapo divyam includes the association of spiritually minded persons, and association of spiritually minded persons means persons who are connected to Krishna. Spiritually minded persons means persons who are connected to Krishna. Exactly what Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, verses that we covered yesterday. So how does it work? By contact with the supreme source of everything, we become blissful because he's the source of all bliss. That's who he is. They are blissful, just like, I'm sitting in a chair and there's no fire. According to Sankhya, within wood, there's fire. We don't feel the heat because it's stored, but there's a way to bring the fire out. Even when it's stored, we bring some fire next to the fire that's stored and the fire comes out. So that similarly, that which is of our nature comes out when you're in contact with who we really are and the Supreme. So by contact with the Supreme, Brahma Sokyam. But you have to dial down the absorption in the material along with Brahma Sokyam. So that's how it works. Your question is how it works. The contact Sachit Ananda Vigraha by one method or another method. So a simple method is chanting or deity worship or hearing of Bhagavad Gita, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing of that which is directly from the personality of Godhead, and not doing other things that I may have an urge to do, like an animal urge to do something. I refrain from that animal urge, something, and instead accept, direct my attention and activity towards the Supreme. That's how divine austerity awakens from its opium. It's like bringing fire out of wood. Very similar. Or there's other examples that are classic examples. Within metal that has a mix of gold, you melt that metal, and then the gold separates out from the other metals. You can mine the gold that way or purify gold that way. The gold that's mixed. Pure gold by fire. It's within that metal, but it has to be extracted. Jonah, you had
That's
something.
right. I think I read many years ago, I'm not sure, that the result for austerity is already built in the process. Whether it's material or spiritual, whatever austerity we perform, the result is already built in that. And
Interesting concept.
that you go to the gym, you pick up a weight and you do like this, it's already inbuilt. You're gonna get that spiritually, whether it's Brahmajyoti or personal impersonation aspect of God you worship in, and you follow that, it's inbuilt. So my question is,
I'm reluctant to buy into the model. In other words, here, practical example from my college days. Over here were the devotees. Over there was a fellow, Baba Das, who was chanting Hare Krishna. And the result of chanting Hare Krishna following Baba Das wasn't bhakti. Same activity. But the purpose was become one with the Supreme, or become the Supreme, your God. That was his thing. And I didn't, and he wasn't so clear about it, but that's where his train was going. Get on that train, that's where you're going. So I'm not sure I buy into this.
so well, materially speaking, material example is different. Spiritually is what we believe in. Like he believed in the impersonal aspect, even though he's chanted Hare Krishna.
Okay. I still don't know if I buy into the model. I mean, supposing it's my destiny. Supposing, my limbs don't work properly. Supposing I have some karma back there, and so I can't lift the weights, or I can something, practice at something, and it just doesn't have the same effect. No, so I'm not sure I buy into the model.
Okay, so the question is, that was a comment. The question is, we might be given good instructions, learning, advice, and we might have some desire for it, but
But
the motivation is not there. Doesn't mindful. Why is the motivation not there?
well, motivation could be X, Y, and Z. It doesn't have to be a pure motivation. No, there's the examples. Let's take Dhruva Maharaj. He did what he did with not a very good motivation. He was in a get back mentality. And the motivation wasn't good. But he got mercy, and when he got that which he wanted by his motivation, he was feeling badly. Why did I want this dumb thing? And then something else happened. Lord Vishnu said, take the kingdom, but no worries. You have become an exalted devotee, and this and that, and the other thing, and the other thing, and the other thing. And you'll get that kingdom in this life, your father's kingdom, and then in your next life you'll be in my abode. Because you become such an exalted person. So what one's motivation, initial motivation is important. And if it's not initially the right motivation through the right association and right guidance, one can come to the proper motivation. Because when he got, he was very sorry that he had that motivation. That is specifically with Dhruva. When Vishnu departed, he could have gone with Vishnu, but he couldn't go with Vishnu because he had to fulfill this obligation of being an emperor of a kingdom a whole bunch of time. So eventually, but the fruit of spiritual practice, taking that example for ourselves, the fruit of spiritual practice may be something on the material side when really that's not going to satisfy. But who from the get-go has a spiritual aspiration only? It's super rare. There's always mix. Otherwise, commonly mix. So then what happens when the mix comes to bear fruition? Now we've got a mix in the mature stage. And how to keep going so it becomes unmixed. That takes the right association, the right guidance. And sometimes the modification of our activity, what to speak of the intention behind the activity, through purification. So ongoing guidance. There's this nice teaching I like very much. It's in the Sanatan Shiksha section of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Let's do this. I'm trying to be responsive, not necessarily agreeing with what you said, but a picture of how bhakti begins. We know from Rupa Goswami and Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Sanatana Goswami, same thing. Bhakti begins by association with devotees, or some preliminary faith and association with devotees. And from that preliminary faith and association with devotees, one may take up the activities of being with the devotees. You do what devotees do when you're with devotees. Bhajana Kriya, and so forth and so on. So Lord Chaitanya is describing all of that, like going, the totality of living entities, and amongst so many living entities, some are in the human form, and some in the human form they're civilized, and some that are civilized follow varnashram, and those that follow varnashram, some are engaged in detached work, and some of those engaged in detached work, they may become in contact with the devotee. So the devotee is very rare. It's like the pyramid thing. And so how one becomes devotee out of so many is association of devotees. And then he goes further and says there are stages of devotees, the Kanishta, Majjhima, and Uttama. And then he goes to the Uttama stage of yoga or bhakti, and he says even in the topmost stages of pure devotees, they need association. So the point is, association of devotees is imperative for us to transform from our material situation to a more purified and fully purified situation. At every stage, even the topmost stage. Even the topmost stage. value association of exalted devotees. So that's the principle I have faith in. The scripture teaches us the same thing. And with that association of devotees, you do with devotees what elevated devotees do in their association. And that's the purification. Just set it down. Thank you. Am I being responsive to your question? Anybody else? Comments or question?
There is an online question.
Really?
Yeah. Madam,
Congratulations, you got live stream going.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Subtle contaminations can easily deviate me from bhakti without my noticing.
Yeah.
What should be my prayers to understand and overcome those contaminations and to perform pure bhakti?
Well, the Bhagavatam is the answer to that question. And the question is within the Bhagavatam, the answer to that question is within the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam is the means of elevation and purification. I mean, in the Bhagavatam, it also speaks about the importance of chanting the holy name. So we could just say this, the chanting of the holy name. But, chanting of the holy name implies Bhagavad Gita, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and being absorbed in the message of Srimad Bhagavatam is our primary means of purification. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He immersed himself in kirtan and he immersed himself in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam regularly from a qualified person, from Gadadhar Pandit, and in the association of devotees every day for hours, along with kirtan for hours. But every day he would hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit and others. Anything else? Yeah.
What comes first? Like in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he was motivated after
Yeah.
his father insulted him, stepfather insulted him. He was motivated and he met with Narad, and then he was instructed in perform austerity with Brahma. Brahma went through a search. He was motivated to find an answer, and then he was told to perform tapasya. So what comes first, tapasya or motivation?
Well, it's not exactly which comes first because the souls are part and parcel of Krishna. And as part and parcel of Krishna, we have what Krishna has, a tiny quantity, and desire is, you can say motivation, is part of that what we have. No, the desire of Brahma, like to know who he is, and the desire of Dhruva to get a kingdom, they're not equal. They're on the same platform. But it's of the soul. So all you have to do is be a soul. That's pretty much all of us. And there's desire. The desire for what? X, Y, Z desire. But it's of the soul, originating from the soul, properly directed, misdirected. So in Dhruva's case, it's the association of Narada that redirected that desire, I want a kingdom desire, to that which will purify him. So desire comes first, and then the application of that desire depends upon association. Now, in the case of Brahma, he's the first created being in the universe, but he also heard. He was searching, and by his searching, he couldn't find. But then he heard. The sound. So that the instruction came following the desire. Because it was sincere desire, therefore the sincere instruction. And he was intelligent enough to know what it meant. If I heard tapa, I don't know what I would get out of that. But he did. He was very intelligent. And he did. Etc. So first comes desire, misdirected or properly directed, and then giving proper direction. So it's the sequence, Adav Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha. So the preliminary is the having some faith. And Dhruva's faith was properly directed by his association with Narada and his mother. But they started with the desire. That's the answer to your question. Desire properly directed. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I had a follow-up question to this. So I'm confused why the Lord arranged for Dhruv Maharaj to rule the kingdom, although his material desire got purified and he
needed
no
somebody to
longer-
rule the kingdom. You can be purified doing devotional service. He wanted him to do devotional service, become purified. So he did.
We have a couple of more questions.
Really? You're a popular guy.
Amanirad Mataji. Guru Maharaj, when we associate with devotees, how can I cultivate the talk of only Krishna? Sometimes when I try to talk about Krishna and Krishna's pastimes, I feel I am different from among the group.
Well, intelligence is needed as to how to speak in certain audiences. And the second is, as your propensity to speak in relation to Krishna, your friends and the audiences that you associate with, they may reduce or differentiate a little bit, but if you start to develop close friendships with those who like to hear and chant and remember Krishna, the circle may shrink a little bit, or at least become modified. May expand a whole bunch, but it becomes different. Then so the first part is it takes some intelligence. What exactly? How did Prabhupada do what he did? In certain circumstances, he would, not like small talk, but he would engage in conversation with people according to where they were at. He would use his intelligence and how to draw them, and then speak something very attractive and very strong about bhakti, about Krishna. So, combination of dedication and intelligence. And where do you get intelligence? From Super Soul. So as you as you go on in the course of your devotional service, intelligence will come from experience and Super Soul guiding from within.
Srida Prabhu. Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj. May I know if Varnashrama Dharma and Bhagavata Dharma are same?
No,
Or Varnashrama leads to Bhagavad Dharma?
it can. Varnashram can stay stuck in Varnashram.
Yeah.
What do I add?
Bhagavad Dharma is
That was correct.
there's extra noise going on here. Bhagavad Dharma starts with Bhagavad Gita, and then from hearing Bhagavad Gita, then Bhagavad Dharma. The activities, the proper conduct of what is pleasing to the personality of Godhead, resting upon Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Varnashram Dharma, it may or may not lead to Bhagavad Dharma. It has the potential, but it's not guaranteed it's going to come to that stage. That's on the person. And those who are guiding that person. Or the Sangha of devotees. And their lifestyle. Yeah.
Following the question about the difference or the same of Bhagavad
Dharma and Varnashram Dharma.
What is the
You want a definition for those two?
So Varnashram, I know that there are
Four.
depending on the qualities and
Yes.
also the spiritual growth also
Yeah,
depends.
okay.
But what is the Bhagavad?
Well, you know the meaning of Dharma, so it's a way of life where Bhagavan is very clearly front and center. And Bhagavad Dharma, as I mentioned, it ushers into one's life from Bhagavad Gita. So hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, remembering the personality of Godhead, focusing specifically on one, the target. Bhagavan. And that's Bhagavad Dharma. A life that revolves around, it may move over here and over there, maybe of this type or that type of personality and occupation, but Bhagavan, front and center and foremost, with strong emphasis from the beginning and then continuing and hearing from the Bhagavad and living one's life accordingly. Okay?
Should it have element of Varnashram Dharma, the Bhagavad Dharma?
Say your question again.
Should it be certain elements of Varnashram Dharma in Bhagavad Dharma?
Yes. Suppose you flip it around the other way.
Yeah, it's not a question.
The persons may be engaged in Varnashram Dharma that don't have the same emphasis. They're not matured yet to the stage of Bhagavad Dharma. But they have some kind of a sense of their duties in life meant to be directed towards Vishnu, but dutiful life according to my position or another's position, respecting another's position, but doing my duty according to codes of Dharma and sacrificing the result of my work to the Supreme. That's Varnashram. Did I answer your question?
It's Varnashram or
That, I just described Varnashram, but it may, depending upon the emphasis and the association, the guidance, and the whole sangha, it may be that may be a subset of the Bhagavad Dharma, but in Bhagavad Dharma it's more natural rather than regulative. Yeah. Okay, I think we should end. Srila Prabhupada
Ki Jai. Holiness Rampa Swami Maharaj Ki Jai.